Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Everybody is here, and Mr. Barry did reach out to me today. He's under the weather. I promised I would call him either tomorrow or Thursday morning to talk about kind of the outcomes and the agreements and the next steps when we get there. So I'll be reaching back out to him when we are through this meeting. All right. Any public comment? Public comment? Mr. Adams, all right. Good, Harry. Good. All right. First things first, old business. You have three different financials kind of in front of you right now. The portrait one that looks like this across the top, it says YTD report DOE cost center for the period of 1/1 through 1/31, both 2024. This is the current budget and where we have expended on our cost centers and our lines. We start every finance meeting with this. Obviously, there's a lot on the agenda today in regards to looking at revenues and expenditures for facilities. So just would like to move through this rather quickly. The first column there on page 1, you've got your local revenues. You can see that we are, well, Jamie, I'll turn it over to you. I want to speak for you. Is there anything of note that we should know about our revenues, about our expenses? And then we'll open it up to any questions. And these are for you to take and digest throughout the week and email with questions if you need to.
So I haven't thoroughly gone through this quite yet. There'll be more in the report that I do for the board packet for next week.
Yeah.
But one thing to note is the state agency client in the state revenues section. We do have a significant increase to that based on, like, we only budgeted $10,000, but we've had a couple of kiddos that have been higher cost moving into the district that are state agency clients, so we are getting more revenues from there than we anticipated. Aside from that, like I said, I haven't gone through the entire report to make any notes. I was trying to get some of this other budget stuff prepared for, but on the very last page, the revenues over expenditures, right now we have put out $1.1 million more than we've taken in revenues to date for the year.
Are all revenues and expenditures for the month of January entered?
They are.
And we're at 55% expended, 55.2% expended. And we're just over the halfway point.
Just over the
So on the revenue side, we're at 49.3% revenue. If we were on time, it would be at 58.3 7 months in. And the reason for that is because we're not calculating in the balance forward. Is that one of those reasons?
It is one of the reasons. The other reason is the tuition. The tuition has 4 months in it where to date, like it would be September to December that's entered, and then there's January for June that still needs to be posted as it, as the months happen.
Yep.
So it's not as simple with that one as saying that it's, that we're halfway through or what have you. It doesn't fall into the fiscal year category where it's a September to June kind of deal, if that makes any sense.
And remember with tuition, when we get that tuition rate in December, hopefully it's up, which it was this year. The tuition rate is up $400 from last year. We have to go back and bill the difference to those sending districts.
And that's reflected in this. Yeah. When Jody did the December tuition bills in January, the retroactive correction back to September was taken care of.
Right, but that doesn't get tell this,
right? That
posting this one.
Yep.
So I actually think that's why we caught up quite a bit in revenue, because I think we were quite a bit behind in our early
also had a jump in the 279, which I think, the 279, the FY '24 279, which I think I mentioned in last month's board packet, with the transportation update and some additional funds for multi-language learners, I think is what it was called. So there was a significant amount of money there as well.
Will you be posting a different report for the February 12th school committee meeting, or will you be using this report?
It'll probably be this report. I generally report for the full month prior to that meeting, so
Yeah, I
For
was just wondering
February,
whether
yeah.
those other things would be updated. Okay. Yep.
Any questions about year-to-date so far? If you have any, or you review this, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or certainly to Jane. So that's the year-to-date report so far. The next thing that I would like to direct your attention to is I would like to start talking about our budget. And specifically, there are two parts that are that have come up and are pressing. The first thing is our capital improvement projects that we would like to target this year. We had a facilities meeting back in December, highlighted several projects. Most of those we now have pretty concrete bids on. We know how much they are going to cost. I'm sure it's not going to surprise anybody when you see some numbers that seem high. Even exterior doors at some of the schools, some of the prices, it's quite shocking. But so what I would like to do is I would like to review where we believe our revenues are going to be. Then I'd like to take you into the cost center of facilities. I sent an email to Brian and Jesse yesterday about today in regards to facilities. This category alone is at $900-something thousand. And so it's a category that I would like to then take and allocate some SIPS projects to, some undesignated from this year, or unassigned, a leftover that we would have, and really try to figure out how to knock that category down a little bit, because I think that that's a category where we can make a major dent and reduce that increase significantly. So, Jamie, does that make sense to everyone? Like what the, kind of that process? Okay. So the revenues it's very thin. It says budget, it says revenues, and it says fiscal year 23-24. So, Jamie, do you want to walk us through the revenues, projected revenues for 24-25?
Yep. So looking at that very first account number, you'll notice that the FY '25 proposed is at 0. This is the amount that we had been asking for to help fund the food service program. Because of the changes with the state reimbursement for lunches, we don't feel that that's necessary to ask for this year. So we've zeroed that out. The local appropriation, the transfer in from reserves, that's at 0 at the moment because it's going to be contingent on what we talk about with the facilities project. So that part has not been updated.
Can I just jump in real quick?
Yeah.
We are looking down FY '25 proposed, that column right there, just so everybody's, just want to throw that up there. Thanks, Jamie.
Yep. The local appropriation, it's listed at $4.3 million in that FY '24 proposed. This is the amount from the 279 from the state for the town portion. So that is up $143,000. And I'm just kind of running down through these, trying to explain where the differences are coming in and how the numbers were derived.
Yeah.
The local appropriation for debt service, that amount goes down a little bit by interest each year. So the interest that will be paid out in FY '25 was a decrease of $10,123.50. So we've knocked that revenue back and also corrected the expense side of actually paying those bills out as well. The local appropriation without state, this is the additional local amount that we asked for from the town to help fund the budget. Right now it is flat funded. K-8 tuition, we have one student that is paying tuition at the elementary school this year, and it's anticipated that they will return next year, so we have budgeted for that one student's tuition. Secondary tuition, I have left at the 2.6. I have some questions. We had a change in enrollment from last year to this year. So when we were building the FY24 budget, the number that we're looking at to build FY25 is lower than what we were looking at with FY24. I have some questions about what the incoming class from 87 is going to look like. I've seen some numbers and I'm confused by them, so I'm hoping that I can touch base with Brian to see if we can.
I can give you real numbers, or
Okay.
well, I should say, not the other numbers of things.
Right,
I
right,
can give you actual
yeah,
Real
pe-
time.
people in seats.
perfect,
Yeah.
perfect. Education, special education tuition, these are services that we provide directly to sending district special education students. So if they're in the resource room or if they're in a self-contained, those are additional costs that we can recoup for those students. There are also what we call one-to-one charges. These are when we have a sending district student that is assigned an ed tech directly, that ed tech spends their time with that one student. And in this case, this year, I am told that we will have a third student for next school year that will have one of these one-to-ones. So we've increased that particular revenue line to reflect that. Interest income, I mean, it's all based on whatever the balance is on the bank account, right? So I have 30,000 in there. I'm gonna be evaluating that some more to see if I can increase that. High school event admissions, this is when we're charging for athletic games, football, whatever it is we charge for, baseball, basketball, what have you. We had previously budgeted 25,000, but now with the students not paying their admission fee, we've dropped it back to 20. And I think it's going to take us a couple of years to kind of get a feel for exactly what that account is going to look like with students not paying. Like, we don't have any information to go forward and with the revenues that we've received in the past. Did it come from students? Did it come from parents? Where did it come from? We don't know. So I think this will give us a good opportunity to change that if needed. Miscellaneous, I'm sorry.
I was saying this.
Miscellaneous revenues, those are going to be things like if we get a workers' comp dividend check, or sometimes the AP exam fees, things of that nature, that's what goes through here. So again, just trying to line things up and catch the trends. Building use revenue, there should be some opportunities where we have allowed other entities to utilize the building, I never get the letters right, but like the travel basketball, for example. If they come in and use our facilities, then they should be paying for not only the staffing, but also just a general fee for utilizing the facilities to begin with. We haven't really done much of it since COVID, and I don't know what it looked like before that. So again, trying to nail that down. Same thing with transportation. This transportation revenue is actually transportation for the rec department. Our buses will take the rec kids on their field trips or their summer trips, or wherever it is the rec takes all their kiddos. But that is starting to pick back up again now, post-COVID. So we have that in the budget this year. The state appropriation, that is the state portion of the 279. That is up $327,000 this year over last year. And then the state agency client revenue. So,
Pause you for a minute.
Yes.
You say it's up that much over last year. It's over what was originally budgeted?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
correct. We don't change the budget for FY '24, even though we got the increased revenue from the 279.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. State agency client revenue, this account is the one that I was just mentioning to you in this cost center report, where we only budgeted $10,000 worth of revenue, but we've actually received $75,000 to date. The reason for that is because we have 2 kiddos that qualify as state agency client that are actually out of district placements. And what that means is all of the services that those kids receive, including the tuition that's paid to Bangor Regional Program, for an example, are reimbursable by the state to the district. So we do a billing every month to the state to recoup that money. That's at the elementary level. The second one is at the high school level. We don't always have a state agency kiddo at the high school, but we do budget a little bit just in case. Let's see here. ROTC revenue, this is the revenue that we receive from the military for having the ROTC program here. It is based off from 50% of the military pay for the individuals running that program. So this is how much we should be getting from the military to fund those programs. E-rate revenue, we are moving over to the MSLN for, well, we're there, I think. So there's nothing budgeted for E-rate revenue because we won't be participating in that category 1 side of the program anymore to have E-rate revenue. We have our balance forward revenue of $1 million again, which is subject to change based on how conversations may go with this facility's CIP stuff. Overall, there's an increase of revenues of $240,000.
Just in front of my brain correctly, when it's in bold legs, which would normally mean a negative, it means that it's an overall increase. It's just the way the balance sheet is done. Right? I just wanted to state that to make sure that my dyslexia wasn't going to kill me. So.
Those are our projected revenues. Any other questions about our projected revenues?
On our ED 279, is that around where we were expecting? Or you were expecting it to land?
Yeah, I think so. And we had when you're looking at the 279, the very basis of it is the enrollments. And we had our I'm trying to think, I should have brought a copy of it with me, but the 2 years that are shown, the older year is a higher enrollment, significantly higher, so 40 kids difference, I think, from that year to last year. So I think it's fair that it went up some, just because of the state changing what they use for the formula behind the scenes with determining how much they're going to pay for, with the salaries portion of staff and things of that nature. So I mean, yes, I think it's fair for where it's at. We are waiting to hear more on the transportation side to see if apparently the state's transportation reports are broken. And I think that there might be an issue on 279 with regards to that we may not be having enough in that line. So I'm
I was
waiting.
gonna ask you that question, because I noticed it came through at 66,000, and I was like, but we bought a whole bus.
Yeah, so I've been working on it for 3 weeks, trying to get an answer, and apparently the state, within the Department of Education, those departments are not communicating with each other. So I'm asking questions to one person, and they're like, no, you've got to go to this one, and then this one's like, I'm gonna send it to the help desk. I talked to the help desk, and they're like, well, you can't go off that report's broke, it's been broke for months. And so now it's made full circle, because I've made sure that they made sure to tell, the head honcho for school finance that there's an issue. And so hopefully, we'll have some updates in the next few days. it's been kind of a go-around.
It's pretty remarkable that our 279 is up several $100s per student because we are down 4 kids from last year average. We're down 40 total. Last year we were 1393. This year we were 1353 in our total count. But then remember, they take a 2-year average. So our 2-year average last year, 1377. Our 2-year average this year, 1373. So a swing of 4 students, but our money overall is up, which is why you are seeing an increase. We still got more per student, and we didn't drop a lot, right? Only 4 kids. So
Not that I want to go down this road, I just want to put a pin in it for later. What happens if we continue the census trend next year to our ED 279, because we won't have the higher year to offset the lower year? So I don't think we need to discuss this today, but I just want to put a pin in it.
yeah, I think Mr. Walsh, will.
He's over here.
We're
making-
going up.
He's old.
Yeah.
We are fortunate, I should say fortunate, we are going up. When I became the real numbers, we're going up.
Where we decreased was
We
in
are.
our 912, not in our K. So
That
that's.
That
is a
will adjust
long-term.
next, and that
It
will
wasn't
adjust
the
next year.
freshman year did the freshman year come in at what you were expecting?
No. It came
Higher
in
or
low- It came in lower.
And that's what I'm wondering, are we gonna see that trend, because it's a decision maker for parents, it's about potential changing of
No,
school?
we are not.
Just
I would
for
be-
clarification, there's information out there on a projection, correct? That wasn't based off in current numbers. So 2 years ago, was it, that the school did a projection of students?
Correct. Yeah, they had an enrollment.
Yep.
We had
In an enrollment projection, but the real numbers doesn't support the projection.
Correct.
And the real numbers actually are working in our favor.
I understand.
The numbers, Jane, that I give to Jamie are butts and seats.
Right.
Physical, actual, count kids, and they are up.
But I think we do need to put a pin in the subject, Danielle. We need to sit down and look at it as a school district of where our numbers are going to be and where do we want them to go. I think that's a reasonable discussion to have. It's related to budget, but probably not best before budget gets done this year.
Especially because we have so much to come, right?
Yeah.
I just want to put a pin in it.
Yep.
One question I do have is, did the revenue, that maybe I just missed it, include the expected tuition, this year's tuition, or projected tuition?
So I left the 2.6 that we have there.
Yep.
I left it because I need to speak with Brian on the number that I was given.
That was
So
the,
it's last year's.
It's last year's tuition.
right. So is that last year's updated tuition or last year's budgeted tuition?
It's last year's budgeted tuition.
Okay, so then that tuition line in itself should go up by at least $400 per pupil.
Not necessarily, because the UTC students we don't see the same increase for them. We only get 2/3 of the tuition rate for those kids. But when we budgeted the 2.6 million, it was based on those projections, which were higher than what actually came in for the enrollments.
Okay.
So that's why I need to get some clarification before I move it in either direction.
Okay.
I'm just hesitant to move it without getting a little more information.
So to follow up on that question, once I have those, I will give you those numbers tomorrow. Will you then take the net, right? So my brain goes, okay, we know there's a net of X amount plus the difference, and then that should change that, right? It'll include that net, what I'm calling a net. It'll include that the difference in the positive. Plus
So we are so early in the game with this whole budget process that normally what I would do before we finalize that tuition number is I would actually go out and try to estimate what the tuition
Gotcha.
rate is going to be for FY '25.
Yeah.
And we're just way too early for me to be able to do
Fair
that at this point.
I know you can do it, you do it well.
I really try to do it well. I have a lot of fun with it.
So
I do have a couple of things. Sorry, just circling back. I realize that in the grand scheme of things, this is chunk change, so it sounds kind of silly. But when we look at the admissions for events, we're already at 70%. If we keep on track next year as we are this year, because there's no change in policy between years, we blow past 20,000. And then same thing for the miscellaneous revenue, we're already at 25.7 and it's budgeted for 20, so I do realize it's chump change, but maybe dialing that in.
I think a lot of the miscellaneous piece is due to timing, so the AP stuff is coming in now, but that will slow down. So I don't know that we're really going to blow by that
AP
one.
stuff?
The AP testing
Oh,
fees, that's what makes up a large part of that number.
and we don't have that next year?
We do have it next year. What I'm saying is for this year, we're not necessarily going to blow by that $20,000 mark because
We already have,
the,
we're at 26.
which one are we at here?
Which one?
Sorry, miscellaneous revenue, it looks like
Yes, okay.
actual is 25.7
Yeah.
and budgeted was 20,000.
Yep, there is also another payment in there that's about $4,000 that we don't know what it is. We're trying to figure out.
Okay.
So,
I would say.
And again, I do realize it's chump change, and I want to give it proportional time, just pointing it out.
With the high school events, we've seen most of our gate revenue because football and
That's what I was gonna
basketball.
ask.
We have-
are in 2 seasons.
we have-
Baseball, we don't charge for, so that's gonna slow down.
You have 3 home games,
With 3 games to go.
Got it.
and there's no more.
So I think that one is gonna be,
Do we think that the track will potentially do anything next year that's not happening this year?
From a revenue standpoint, I've never been to a track and field where I have to pay, so I don't know.
Okay.
That's something we can start doing.
And
Out of
then,
the scope of this discussion.
yeah. So, and then the other piece
Okay,
is,
well, no,
the MPA will charge you if it's a state, but that's another.
but we don't get that money.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
get that money.
so I understand, I hear when we talk about flatlining the additional local appropriations, that sounds like a flatline. In my mind, and I think in the other counselors' minds, what we envisioned was the combined total of the two would be flatlined. Because otherwise, there's an increase in taxes to the taxpayer. So I feel confident speaking, and Ron, feel free to come alongside me or disagree, that the council is looking not only on the school side, but also on the town side for flat to the taxpayer, because we had such a massive increase last year. So our goal would be to try to dial it in so that the two combined are flat, not the
Sure.
one line.
So there's actually more than just those 2 lines that make up what comes from the taxpayers. The decrease of 50,000 for that food services is also a part of that, as well as the 10,000 for the debt service. Those are all part of that single appropriation payment that we received.
So it looks like you're gonna
Each
come up with 8,000.
So, exactly, we're not far off.
You haven't seen all the expenditures.
So, but again,
No, I
I mean,
haven't.
it's just, we're so early in this. It's,
I just thrown it out there.
You guys expect the valuation to increase with inflation? So,
The total town's valuation,
that you base taxes on.
we haven't gotten that far in the conversations yet.
But usually every year that increases with inflation, right?
It increases with property values.
Yeah.
Which we had a healthy increase on this. You know, it's that.
Last year and this
Me too.
year. Last year.
It's not going down.
Right.
Yeah.
I just want to set expectations on, we're going to do our best to flatline it, but we should expect some increase just with inflation.
I'm so proud of you.
All right, I'd like to direct your attention to our first major cost center that has significant increases. Most people are pretty aware of how facilities works in this group and how we, some of the projects, not all the projects, but a lot of the projects we've talked about. So I'd like to take a healthy portion of the next 30 minutes to talk about the facilities cost center. What I would do is I'm going to have you jump a few pages because remember, in this facilities cost center, we have a variety of things that are untouchable or unchangeable, whether it's FICA, main PERS, just salaries in general, operations, maintenance. And I think Jamie did a really good job on some of this facilities budget, highlighting like the routine and annual services that occur throughout the year, whether that's elevator maintenance or whether that's plowing or, what's that?
Jason.
Jason, sorry. Jason, does a good job at saying like, again, we do this all the time. This is an annual, this is a routine service. So if you would, entertain me and go to where I think we can really start talking about some projects, I'd like to go to page 17. And the first project that I'd like to bring to your attention is the abatement of the asbestos floor in the cafeteria. It's about halfway down, and you can obviously see that we have a pretty significant increase in that overall column at the elementary school, from budgeting $19,000 last year to $197,000 this year. And you can see what makes up for that. So we have an abatement at $16,800. We have obviously finishing the gym floors, that's an annual project. Yeah. But then we have that installation of that new ceramic tile. And if you remember from the facilities committee, we talked about making sure that we do not only the cafeteria, but that we run that out into the entryway so there's a seamlessness there. We don't have a gap or a break in the tile. So it's not, I do not know the square footage of the lobby. If you've been in there, you know it's not that much more than, the cafeteria is 4,000 square feet, right? So you have two pretty significant increases in that project, $16,800 and $38,000 to take care of that floor. Do you want to speak to that floor at all, or I know we already kind of covered some of this, but.
Yeah, the floor, it is existing, it's asbestos tile underneath. The problem is it is starting to crack and break, so there are a lot of tiles that are coming up. It is one of the final areas in the elementary school that still has the asbestos tile. And so we've budgeted for it for a couple of years. We get it done, but it's been one of those projects that can't be cut. We are kind of at a point right now that we can't cut it anymore.
In addition, if you just stay in the same column, something that we also really feel is imperative that gets done this year is the $15,000 for a new storage tank, water storage tank, which is right below that ceramic tile. And then we move into two other projects that we have talked about.
Can I pause you for a moment? I'm so sorry. We don't have the full expenditures, so when we're looking at these expenses that you're proposing, do the overall expenditures of the budget right now, are we over or under budget compared to the revenue you just put in? I would look at this numbers differently, knowing at where we're at.
We're well over $2 million above our revenue.
Okay, so right now, what I'm looking at, this facilities is part of $2 million over the revenue that you just showed us.
Correct.
Thank you for clarifying
No
that.
problem.
It just makes me look at this differently.
Yeah.
And these projects are the ones that we're looking to apply to the unassigned fund balance that we talked about.
I've got a couple of different ideas on where to put some projects and where to put other projects, yes.
So by using the unassigned fund balance, we're going to be reducing, what you said, we were $2 million over, we would possibly be reducing that.
I want to get this facilities down almost $800,000 to $900,000. So right off the bat, we're coming down.
Yep. Okay.
Into that range of $1 million over. And then I will be, not to jump too far ahead, I'll be meeting with the principals and directors again on Friday to talk about staffing and hitting special ed as well, because then I can start to focus on some other cost centers where we can streamline and trim. But this one I felt like was very appropriate for this group at our current stage of time. So we had talked about replacing some exit ramps and restroom partitions, which that is really a 50 and a comma, that's really $50,000, that's not a 5,000, as well as replacing 2 exterior doors and hardware. So in 3 projects, you are roughly $125,000-ish in those 3 projects. What I'd like you to consider is I hate that sound. I would like to.
Yes, so do I.
Same.
I would like to take the $59,000 for the ramps and the $50,900 for the bathrooms and the 2 exit doors, and I would like to take those 3 projects and I would like to put them into, again, we'll have to play this by ear, but I'd like to put them into this year's budget for our what we don't expect. because I do think that we will be on track to not expend $120,000 to $130,000. And if we can get them done before June 30th, that is, I think they fit the bill of good capital improvements for one-time costs. They are certainly, their safety concerns. They're at our elementary school, which parts of it need work. And they would obviously knock off a significant number from your overall. I don't want to just cast them aside. We can do that later if we had to. Like, hey, we're just not going to do these two projects this year. But I think this would be a good opportunity to use unallocated funds at the end of the year and get these three projects done. Bathroom partitions, exterior doors, and some ramps and canopies on those third grade. I think third grade, Melissa.
I will say, if I can add something that I was with Cody and Jesse, when we were doing the inspection down there, those ramps really aren't bad.
Yeah. There are safety concerns.
Yeah.
I'm not weighing in on the project itself. I just want to make sure that we manage it correctly, money-wise, in the sense that how we identify it. So we're using a baseline budget of what we need for operating costs, so now we're taking this as an additional CIP. If we're going to be able to manage future budgets, we need to know what we spend year over year for regular operating costs. So let's say this is what it costs to operate year over year as a normal operating budget. And then we're going to find that we are currently at about a 95, we project to be at like a 95% usage rate verification, or however you want to call it, which means there will be money left over at the end of the year. Absolutely. I think I'm not debating.
No,
I just want to make sure that we account for it correctly, so it doesn't show next year that it was part of the '24 budget,
Right.
operating budget, but it was cut out as a CIP or capital, or so that we properly account for it.
Yeah.
And I had those down on my list too, the work is expensive, but.
And jumping off from what you're saying, one of the things you did for me last year, Jamie, that we'd really like to see again this year is historically, the school looks budget compared to budget, like 3-year numbers of budgets. What we really want to see is what was the actual, not the budgeted in 2023. Because when we're looking at costs, we're saying, where did you come in at? And growth in our mind would be related to that, not related to what was budgeted.
And then to back up even further, to springboard off on what Danielle is saying, is we already identified that we've got somewhere in the neighborhood of a $600,000 out of compliance of the DOE unassigned fund balance. If you're putting this up now, I mean, why couldn't this be out of that block of money? Unfortunately, I think in a very compartmentalized manner. In the discussion we had 3 or 4 months ago was that we were going to come in compliance with DOE before we even started the budget process. What we haven't officially done yet. And what I'd really like to see is for us to go to the school committee and have it be part of the CIP plan for, we are out of compliance for DOE, approximately $600,000 to come in compliance. And we're going to come in compliance by, and then these projects. I'm not picking at the projects. I'm picking at the rationale on which we pay for. So that when we enter into future budget planning this year, which would be in the next month, we can already, derail the conversation that we have this huge unassigned fund balance that you're not using. Because the answer is we're in compliance with DOE. And we're in compliance because we've already allocated this money to do these projects that you pointed out. And again, I'm not picking at the projects, I'm picking at the
That's the goal, that's what it's doing.
Yeah.
Because if we come in at the end of the year with $125,000 unexpended, that goes right back in.
Yep.
Right, so to me, we're leveraging against any money that we might have left over for very worthwhile facilities improvements. And then we're gonna pull X amount of money from that designated fund for some more projects that are coming. And that's gonna help bring down that number to 9%, 6%, 3%, right, over the next 2 years, let's say.
Are we out of compliance, Jamie?
I have to double check the thing, we're within the 9%. After the carry forward amount, I believe we are in compliance with the 5%. I have to double check what that
we had a finance meeting,
Title 20
I want to say
agencies.
in October. We were about $600,000 out of compliance
Meaning we didn't have a plan over 3 years to get,
to use $600,000. And
That was after the pull forward, if I remember
Yes, it was.
correctly.
I don't remember,
That was based off last fiscal year coming in under
Yes.
budget.
yes.
I don't remember never having a plan to get under the thresholds.
Yeah, I'd have to go back. I don't remember off
We've
the
always
top of
had
my
a
head,
plan,
but
it's
that,
just if we added to it by X amount,
Right.
then we have to adjust that plan.
Right, okay.
And that's always, Hank's always done a good job of drawing up, right, how much money you should be taking. And it will, the problem is we get them one time a year. We get them on whatever date that is. And so
Okay.
we have to make these adjustments, I think, now.
Yes.
So that when it gets questioned, and rightly so, at certain points in the budget process, we can say, yeah, we know we were about 600,000 over, we're gonna spend the entire budget on this, right? So it's a zero budget, or zero revenues and expenditure, or very close to that. And we're gonna do these projects with some money from undesignated funds to continue to draw off that number so that we are getting, reaching 6% and 5% and ultimately, that 4.
I just wanted to make sure that we're throwing out of compliance, and we're not out of compliance, we're at risk of being out of compliance.
I believe we're out of
Well, we're out of
compliance.
compliance.
The June unassigned fund balance was 3.1 million, and the DOE authorized was 1.5 million. So we were out of compliance by 1.5 million.
for the one,
For the one
For the 1 year.
But to be fully out of compliance, it takes 3 years.
So
Yes.
just,
I'm concerned with throwing the term out of compliance
Yes.
around because we are not out of compliance.
can I speak to that? Because I asked the auditor. So historically, the school committee has done pull forwards over multiple years to bring them into compliance with the 9%. But then at the end of the year, they don't actually use it, and so they're actually out of compliance. And the auditor, you can go back and watch the video when I asked him, he said a historical trend of us putting it on the books that we're gonna use it and not use it, for I think we're at 4 consecutive years now, would be a problem with, likely be a problem with the state. Because we're not actually complying with the, you have to spend it. That's the part of it, we have to spend it within 3 years of getting it, and in 4 years, we haven't done that. And I'm not trying to I'm trying to get us not be in trouble.
No, I'm just, nothing was reported by the auditor to us that way, so I just want to make sure we're clear, Jamie, from the auditor's perspective, the report that he provided, that we're not officially out of compliance.
So this was a follow-up questions to the report, and if you want me to ask before the next report comes out, so it's written in there, I can, but I can send you the video link.
No, I don't need, I'm just talking about the written report from the auditor, that's all. Okay.
Yeah, this was in follow-up questions to the written report.
Okay, all right.
So we support the plan to spend the money, let's make the plan, let's move forward with it, let's get going.
But we need to
Yeah.
spend like $600-some thousand to get us.
We need to, not necessarily spend, but we need to,
In the next 3 years,
we need to have a plan for it.
execute it within 3 years.
Yeah, but that also includes putting it in a reserve, we want to use reserves for, out of district tuition or.
I'm not sure it does though, because if you look at the state reg says that we actually have to spend it within 3 years of receiving it on something that lowers taxpayer costs. It's very, I brought the regs with me, and I didn't really realize the whole part of it. So it's not good enough just to have a plan or to set it in a reserve. It has to be utilized within 3 years. So we put it in a reserve, it has to be on a project that's spent within 3 years of when we got the money. And since we've added to it for 4 years in a row, it's safe to say that we need to spend some money right now to clean it back up.
But the good news is we want to do your projects.
Yes. So bring it on! Bring it
Let's
on!
look at these projects, but I appreciate it because it benefits the kids, right? And I know that's what you guys are.
I got some projects, man. Let's
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
How much you
All
wanna
right,
spend?
let's continue to motor through here. So, moving on to page 18. So that's 123,000 that I'd like to expend this year. Those are projects we feel very comfortable that we can get done before June 30th. Moving into page 18, very top, you have I don't know why that says upgrade. That should be, doesn't matter. That's a new roof. It's not an upgrade. It is a new roof, which certainly is an upgrade. But we're looking at putting on and I think Jason described it as a new rubber roof. That roof hasn't been done. We feel very good about that number and that initial bid that came in on that number. So we feel like that's a pretty solid number. I would like to pay for that out of our reserve account. That would be a SIPS project in a traditional from a reserve account. Specifically, I would, and I talked to Josh a little bit about this, but we didn't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. I would like to pay for that out of, I would like to use the school, hold on. Where's that? Yeah. School fuel reserve account. There's $229,000 for the audit sheet that Josh sent me, for the account balance sheet. There's $229,000 in that gas reserve. It's called the school fuel reserve, Hermon 27. And I'd like to put that on to the SIPs. You guys call it like a warrant or ballot or Google or warrant. I'd like to put the school transportation garage roof on that at the price of $9,000. Any concerns with that request?
Absolutely. I don't see any, just make sure, whatever you want to do, you can hold it, Josh, so it's over.
Yep.
Paperwork on how many gets in front of us.
Yep. Okay, so that would be one of the things that I make a request of him when we talk to him.
Again, I question having it come out of a reserve budget.
Well, I think
That's a
Brian,
philosophy that we need to work through,
Well,
it's not gonna help tonight, but.
my concern, Brian, is that we can't do it before June 30th. So we can't do it out of this year's budget. I just don't think it can be completed in time. That's all.
Assigned to it. So it's
I'd have to ask
unassigned.
Jamie.
It would have to go through the reserve. We wouldn't, if it wasn't completed until after June 30th, it would come out of the next fiscal year. So we need to put it through the reserve process, even if it means we take money out of the FY '24 funds that might be left over and assign it to
That reserve,
that reserve.
okay.
It would still need to go through the reserve
We
process.
could put it in the budget and then pull $1,090,000 out and
Yep.
say that 90,000 is from a designated fund and it is going towards that.
You can do that.
So if we're talking about so going down your road, if we talk about the 700,000 was originally what, last year you projected $700,000 as a pull forward.
We use
And-
$1 million in this budget.
Right.
Yep.
If we add the 600,000 to the 700,000, that gives you 1.4 million to do out of the operating budget, and then we don't have to put things through the reserve. The problem with putting stuff through the reserve right now is taking out of the reserve does not help our 9% issue. Putting it through the pull forward helps our 9% issue because we're spending it within the 3 years. So I guess I do have a concern about pulling it out of the reserve because that reserve money, if it was put in there prior to us being out of compliance, is not an issue. We don't have to spend it in 3 years. So why make our problem any worse than it already is? So I think the pull forward, adding to it and taking it out of the pull forward and therefore then making it designated.
So I think
There's nothing wrong with that.
there's nothing wrong with that. I think what you folks have to understand is I've seen the whole budget. And so you're kind of looking right now at a clouded mirror, and I kind of orchestrated this plan, so I'm making suggestions based on $21 million budget and how to get the whole thing down. That was just one way, and to not pull X amount more from an undesignated fund. That's all. That's why I'm making the suggestions that I have, is because I came in with a plan of this is what I think we should do. But we can certainly put the $90,000 out of undesignated fund too, and we can make other adjustments in the budget to personnel and things like that. Does that make sense? I said that articulately.
I think it's just a matter of getting through this, look
Yeah.
at, seeing
Yeah,
what the
because
expenditures
what the
are,
overall
what
plan
the
is.
overall
Yeah.
plan is.
Yeah, I know, we're hitting these singular items and, yeah. Okay, let me give you an easy, so that's, let me give you an easy one. Why don't you drop down a couple more lines And you're gonna see a couple of really big numbers under the Earth Room Science Lab, 167, and the Chem Lab creation. You got $120,000 and $300,000. We've had a couple of companies come out and bid this out, engineering-wise, and what I mean by bid that out is they've told us they'll engineer it for us, here's our bid. They can't even come in and do that until summertime. There is no way we could even begin to do full-scale renovations in these science labs in this budget cycle. So my proposal is we take out the 120 and the 300 right off the bat. Like, there you go. There's $420,000 you can just drop right out of the facilities at this point, because we can't even get them done this year.
So then we would push it potentially off to the next year.
And obviously we get some better pricing at that point. These were placeholders based on what we thought from some of the 2019.
Yeah, these numbers are not high enough. No, I mean seriously.
Well,
when we get those from the engineer, it's gonna be,
Yeah.
I'm worried what it's actually gonna be,
Yeah, I mean,
in all seriousness.
and that, now, I will take your attention back, that engineering bid is very, that is an actual number to engineer those two spaces, the 68,000. That is something I would like to keep in so that we can get an up-to-date, accurate cost for the renovations.
Does it include plans for the, like, is it everything, so then we just send it out to bid and build?
Yes, that's how they've written the proposal.
So what would the time, so assuming the perfect world,
Perfect world.
we get the engineering in here this summer, to do
Yep.
it, when would it be built? Would it be 2020?
So the perfect world would be the summer of 25.
Right, summer of
Budget of
25, okay.
26.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's $420,000. We had talked about that in facilities. It's not feasible this year, so that can come out right off the bat.
Do you have an idea, Brian, how much this is gonna cost?
I'm not an engineer, but
Okay,
I'm
you
just
just know it's
worried.
low.
He stuck
I'm
that
worried,
all in.
yeah, no, but I am worried because prices have, everything's gone up. And so, we're looking back at 2019 numbers, so, and I know some stuff has adjusted, but inflation's also gone up, so I'm guessing 420 is more like 6, but I'm not a,
That's all right, I just wondering.
I'm worried about that, but at the same time,
What I like is that we'll have a very detailed plan that we can send out to
Correct.
multiple people and get very accurate numbers, and then, again, just have a better plan moving forward.
So now we're down like 540, 60?
Yeah, we're down,
Can't remember what the contract was.
yeah, I had it overall written, but
Keep going.
the goal is to get you to about 800, that's the goal today. A couple other things that I just want to touch on. If you look at our heating oil, you can see that we are well under our actual this year. So I am going to be playing around with some of the heating numbers because I think that we are, and again, that is a hard number. It's been a weird winter. I know from my own personal home that we're not even close to where we were last year in regards to our.
it's awesome.
It's been great. So actually, I think, I don't know if we'll make a lot of adjustment, but I think that's gonna give us some leeway to do some of these other things too. So it's not just necessarily over budgeting, it just was, this is global warming, I'll take it, because this has been an amazing winter as far as I'm concerned. You bought a new snowmobile. So I just wanna highlight a couple of those oil numbers there that, again, just an anomaly of the winter, especially January. And then if you go with me to page 23, there's another project that I would like to try to accomplish out of this year's budget, and it's a $39,000 fence for the athletic fields.
Right, did you have this in the budget last year? You had a fence in the budget last year.
Baseball.
Yeah,
Okay, baseball.
this is the new project, around the new project.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'd like to try to accomplish that. I believe that's a project that we can get done.
Correct.
And that could come out, I think we'll have enough room to budget for that, that $39,000 fence project. Then the rest of a lot of those is just ground and maintenance. And correct me if I'm wrong, but is that sand and snow? Oh, no, that's high school, yeah, okay, so that's a normal expenditure. And then, go with me to the top of 24. One of the things that we talked about in the facilities committee was a paving project at the middle school. So this would be the entire front lot, the back road around the middle school. There is a back lot. There's a little bit, there's quite a bit of space for us to pull our buses in. And there's also a side lot, and that road continues behind the middle school and all the way back out to the front. I wouldn't encourage you to drive back through there, but our middle school parents could probably speak to it. It is it's in pretty bad shape. We had a $160,000 quote for paving. I actually worked with Mr. Berry a little bit on this last week, and I think I can say this. I would like to try to work out an in-kind project for that. An in-kind payment. And one of the proposals that I think would be nice if it came from maybe the finance committee or from myself. I would like to work with Mr. Hopkins regarding some of the recent naming of facilities, and he's already done quite a bit. And he doesn't know this yet, so this is new to him if you talk to him, but I'd like to talk to him about some in-kind work that would result in the naming of something here that I think he's pretty near and dear to, if he would be interested in taking on that project. If not, I would cut that out of our budget, that paving project. I don't think it is not good, but we still have some time. But I think that's a number that we can either get covered, or we can hold off at least for another year.
I appreciate you sharing that. I just want to share, because we do have people in the audience and obviously people around the table. In general, when trying to get donations of this size or comparable, confidentiality is the best until there's a situation. So if people, you can't ask them to do this, and maybe I can't ask them to do this, but if people can just be as close to their best, so we don't jeopardize it.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No,
Adam's quiet.
I'm not saying that.
so, thank you, Danielle. So that 160, that will be coming out of the budget. And then the last thing is on. So we have the fence, the paving, the roof. We've got multiple projects going on at the, yeah. So I believe that takes us to a grand total of, I think I've got us at roughly $790,000 out of the facilities when you add up all those projects. Actually, I think it's a little more. I think it's 830. I'd have to go back and add it again, but it's close to 800,000, and brings our increase into the, I think, into the single-digit percentile. And again, I think we can play around with potentially the fuel a little bit.
When you say that, you mean the overall increase?
Yeah, the overall increase. If we knock about 800,000, Jesse, off that 980, we're only gonna be up about 180. And I think that's a lot more realistic.
So you're saying the 2 mil that we talked about earlier is now down to 1.2? Am I hearing you right?
Yeah, Dana, that's not a firm
Ballpark,
number,
I
but yeah,
understand.
that's a ballpark.
I understand.
And that gives me 9 other cost centers, well, debt service I can't touch. But that gives me 6 or 7 other cost centers now to go look at, and really look at our personnel, to look at special education. And where this was such a big number, where you were all kind of familiar with this, I felt like this was the first and appropriate place to begin attacking. Because it's a lot of money we just cut out, or figured out other ways to expend it. And then what we can do is we can put the 90,000 out of undesignated fund balance first, and see what that does to our numbers, and then we could go to reserve second if we felt like that was a better pathway.
It wasn't put in here, and I know it has been discussed, it's over at the elementary school, the parking issues. And I realized that only kind of came to a head in the last 3 months, in the last facilities meeting, but I realized for this year it's aggressive to say we're going to include that, but I think it needs to stay on the table for discussion, that the elementary school parking is an issue.
It ended up being a little bit more, sorry, if I could go.
No, I have something to say.
A little bit more complicated of an issue
Yeah, with the environmental.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with that, with, some of the regulations around the land use and all of that, so.
Local or state regulations?
I think what will help too is we'll have Carpenter Associates doing that entire facility study. And I think that will help. I think they'll be able to help us with that for next year. We just didn't have enough time to get that on the docket as far as bidding and what that would cost. It was pretty aggressive.
So, out of this, do we have, I know the town's asking for their CIP list. Do we have, I mean, was that your CIP list, the way you cut them out? Is that how you plan on presenting, pushing forward to CIP?
Yep, I have one other request for CIP. It's out of special education. And so I was just gonna talk to Josh about that and come forward with the out of district placement. But that's a me and Josh conversation, and I don't anticipate, that's something we've talked about now for 2 years. So it was looking at 190,000 out of the CIP, 90 for the roof, 100,000 for out of district placement.
Taking 100,000 out for out-of-district placement, is that the contingency funding just in case, or is that the actual operation out-of-district placement?
That's gonna be the contingency just in case,
Okay.
and we're gonna have another very low budgeted amount for that this year, in next year's budget.
I did want to
I
talk.
can't budget at a zero because we already budgeted it, and so to back it to zero, we would actually be hurting ourselves if I took those numbers and I backed them off. You know, I think they were 40 grand, 30 grand, 25 grand per building, somewhere in that range. And if I took them to zero, that would actually negatively impact our special ed funding. So, yeah, it's a contingency fund.
So, the state had a change in their state agency client definition, and unfortunately, I'm familiar with the definition. It looks like it may drive more costs locally to send clients out of district, which could be a substantial cost increase. Who do we use the Maine Municipal Association, is anybody talking about that? Like, am I misunderstanding this change, or, because they've tightened up what is defined as a state agency client. So, for instance, if somebody did not give custody of their child to the state would no longer pay for, it appears, out-of-district placement, say for a mental health situation in Utah for 13 months and a substantial amount of money, they would now push it on to this, it looks like they'll push it on to the school. Am I misinterpreting their new change?
I'm not enough familiar with it. Cindy Badger would probably be the one more familiar with that.
I just think it's something we've got to be aware of, because if that's the case, it could be.
Typically for a state agency like this foster place student, there's no like, hey, they're living with because that falls under for us the McCabe-Menzel Act, Homelessness Act.
So not all kids that the state was previously paying for placement were in foster care. I unfortunately know that.
Right, but for us, when we bill state agency, we're looking at students who are awarded the state who have been placed with a family.
I think I'm being unfair, but we can talk about another place. I just think it's something you guys should look at to make sure we're adequately prepared. And then the other piece is, last year there was one other warrant article that was supposed to be on the warrant articles to be voted on. And it didn't make it through, so I just want to make sure we get it through this year. It was the changing of the funds from the enrollment stabilization reserve to the CIP for $100,331. Now I'm sure it's not that amount, it's more. But, so I don't know what steps we have to go through to make sure that happens this year. I don't know if you guys need to vote on it again, or if we can just do it based off last year's school committee vote.
I think we can vote on it again. I don't know what happened before, if there was a miscommunication, I don't know, I didn't get on the ballot before, but we talked about it, so.
It should just be added on to when we vote for the budget as a final.
Same as we did last
Yeah,
year.
yeah, we vote for the budget and add that in there to make, just to make sure it's clean.
I would definitely vote again, though,
Yep.
just
Yeah.
And I don't think there'd be any opposition to it, so we just do it for clerical reasons, clerical housekeeping.
So I only say that so when you put the CIP budget through to Josh, this should be on it, not on the regular budget, but on the CIP numbers.
And Mike, not related to facilities, but do you or Jamie have just a ballpark of what the increase is for the step-ups in our staff wages and whatever?
For wages?
Well, just all, for everybody, all contracts.
Yeah, it's over 500,000.
Okay. So we should expect $500,000 increase just based on contractual step-ups.
In wages, yes.
In wages,
For
okay.
jobs, yeah. And remember, we're negotiating our largest unit this year, which is
Sure.
our teachers, so we do have placeholders, which I would prefer not
Sure,
to say.
yeah.
I would like to keep them very close to the vest.
But before we, because I realize we're over time, can we establish a timeline?
Yes, yeah. So, thank you, Brian.
All of this is killing me without a timeline.
So I
Just talk to my wife and me not having a timeline, it's an emotional event for me, so.
So like Jamie said, and this is, I commend Jamie, this is tax season, this is W-2 season, they are a one-stop shop, they're the HR department, their main purse, their AP, their warrants, their payroll, they're doing a great job. But I know, she's stressed, and then I stress her out, and then she stresses me out, and we go back and forth, and I say, you gotta get me that number. But anyways, I would love to be able to bring forward February 12th first reading to the school committee. I do not know if I can do it. I just, to be perfectly honest, I don't know, and I don't want to rush it.
Yep.
I would prefer to set another facilities, a finance meeting on February 12th.
Actually, I've sent this to the chair, and if we could talk about it openly. I think going for the 12th at this point would be problematic. I feel very strongly that before first reading goes before the committee and the public, that we should have some sort of workshop where the public can have their impact or their input prior to our first reading, so that we can incorporate those ideas prior to the first reading. So in looking at how much work you have to do, I think 12 February timeframe for first reading would be very tight. So I know I sent this to Stephanie a little bit ago, but if you'd like to look at that, Mike, as a proposed timeline, if we can't meet the 12 February. Like I said, not having a timeline is an emotional event for me, so.
So what I'd like to do is I'd like to set up February 12th, do a finance committee, right before the school committee, somewhere in that range, in that 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock range. Right, school committee's at 6:30. Bring a couple more cost centers to you folks, right, and just kind of continue to work through where we feel like we can move some money, pull some money from one side. Then what I'd like to do is we can incorporate one of these dates, budget workshop or budget committee, whatever that might be, at that meeting on the 12th. First reading from March 4th. Yep. And then we have a special meeting on probably the 18th. It just makes sense to do 2 weeks later, right, on Mondays, for our second reading, and we can still be to town council for March 20th.
Could you actually look through that? I mean, I'd like to, Jesse, propose this to the school committee as a timeline. I'm not wed to my timeline, I think we should propose to the school committee and the community at the 12 February school committee meeting, a timeline in which we're going to accomplish this. And that way I'll be able to sleep at night.
Got like 13 days of no sleeping.
And it's just kind of nuts.
Brian, do you mind if I look at this and then
Absolutely.
make that proposal
Yep,
at the school committee? Because I also want to work in negotiations around this, and that's also obviously very high on my priority list. So I just want to make sure I don't book up nights that I can set aside for that.
I can email that to you as well if you like.
Yeah, that'd be great. But February 12th, if that works for people. And then obviously, large picture, big picture, March 4th, March 18th, then March 29th for the county council. That's just a big
Prior to
picture.
the school committee meeting on February 12th?
Yes, 5 to 6.
What was March 18th?
March 18th, I'm going to be requesting a special meeting to approve second reading of the school budget. And then we obviously have a couple of dates, or a date, in between that for revisions if needed, open dates and stuff.
Actually, I think that's pretty close. Good.
Does the CIP budget have to go before the school committee for a vote before we vote on it for the council?
We haven't before, has it been part of the process? We just approved the overall budget with CIP included.
Yep, we are,
So, I don't know, last year I tried, the charter is very specific that the towns and schools CIPs have to be approved in March.
Right, but the charter doesn't line up with the way the school budgets work.
Right, so the good thing is
Charter
the
committee.
charter committee coming up.
Yeah.
So would you like that
No.
modified?
I would, because it's.
I'm taking notes.
Right, because I can't, the school committee has to approve the budget, CIP's coming as a revenue, or shown in the budget as a revenue, and they get approved right on that second reading and then at the county level. So it's like we're approving CIP, but then we're gonna do the same thing a month later with the school budget. So it doesn't gel that. Ultimately matters, 'cause
I'm a rule follower. He likes timelines and I follow
It's never
rules.
Joe.
So if we need to
It's never
change
Joe's
the
fault.
rules,
You need to change the charter.
I put it on there.
All right. Well, Mr. Murphy, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Zachary, thank you. Appreciate it. If you have any questions, please let me or Jamie know, and I'll see you all on February 12th.